Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, a podcast that brings a special guest out of the multiverse and straight to you. And now your host, David Ginsburg.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Tales from the Fandom. We are off of hiatus, and I am super happy to have a local guest today. Joining me from the Orlando area is Susy. You may know her on Instagram as Susy in the Sky Designs, and she's also a member of Sailor Guardians Orlando. Welcome to Tales from the Fandom, Susy.
Hi, thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
I am super excited to have you. I do have to say, I love my Sailor Moon cosplayers and my Sailor Moon groups. From Cosmic Coterie in Texas to the Sailor Scouts of Jacksonville and Sailor Guardians of Orlando. You all of you, like all Sailor Moon cosplayers, seem to just be super positive and wonderful people. So thank you so much for coming.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah, I've noticed honestly that almost all Sailor Moon cosplay groups are just kind of like the show, just promoting positivity and happiness and friendship. So it's nice for someone to recognize that. Thank you.
Oh, you are quite welcome. And it's also nice to have a local Orlando area person too, because I reach out as far as I can internationally or even, the United States. And it's fun to talk to people all over. But you and I will be able to relate to, oh man, it's hot, or wow, that hurricane was kind of coming and it didn't.
That hurricane was a dud.
Well, I am super appreciative that it turned, because it could have been bad for us.
Oh, absolutely. And I am too. It really could have been bad. It was directly going to hit us. And I'm glad it didn't. But, at the same time, my kids missed school and I missed work, and everyone was kind of like, okay, why?
Yeah, my kids were off. I think they were off for 2 days. My wife was off work for 3. I work from home, so I was off work 0 days because I still had internet access.
That didn't die.
Nope, that didn't die. So I just kept plugging along. But I do want to say that you're the first episode back. We generally have a hiatus in September, because September gets really crazy for us in the household, because kids going back to school and all these clubs and school things that you have to do. Like today, as we're recording today, the kids had open house today, and it's always something. It feels like in September. So, but you were my first episode to kick things off for this new set of recordings. So I'm excited to dive in. And not only am I excited to dive in and talk to you about fandoms, there is a fandom that I do not believe I have talked about in over 3 years of doing this podcast. And when I saw it on your list, I was so thrilled and excited, because I loved this TV show way back in the day. And I'm going to do a rewatch because you told me where to watch it. And we're going to talk about The X-Files.
Yes. The X-Files is a huge part of my life. I've been watching it since I was a little kid.
Oh my goodness. I remember it came on, because I Wikipedia'd it. I told you, so I'm cheating here. But it started in 1993, and that's when I started high school, was 93. And that was the show. That was one of the few shows that I watched religiously. Every week I was watching The X-Files and having my mind blown every week.
Oh my God. Yeah. I was in elementary school when it came out, but my parents were really big fans of the show, and they would watch it and they would let me watch it with them. And, now as an adult, and I have 3 kids, and I don't really know if that was a good idea for them to let me watch that at the time, but I loved it. And I thought it was so crazy, and it opened my mind to all these conspiracy theories. And I really, truly believe that it shaped my weird mind as an adult. I loved it. I was a big fan of Mulder.
When I always like to find out, because I think the predecessor for the X-Files for me was I don't know, and you might be too young to remember it, but there's a show called Unsolved Mysteries.
Oh yes.
Okay. See, I was really into Unsolved Mysteries in middle school. So I'm already on that mysterious what's going on weirdness, and then here comes this show that kind of fills like that niche of like, you get like the monster of the week thing, but you have like this huge story arc that continues throughout the entire series, and it was so good.
Well, and that's something I always loved about the X-Files back when I was a kid, and then now as an adult that I obviously understand it a lot more, was that there was a huge storyline that was from the very first episode until the very end, and now with the reboot it continues, and it's very intense, very deep, and it all ties together. But at the same time, you had these silly episodes in between that, some of them were intense as well, but others were kind of like comic relief, even though they were still science fiction and supernatural and whatnot. But some of them were really funny, especially the ones that David Duchovny directed. Those are some of my favorites.
Oh my goodness. What was it as a kid that drew you to the show? I mean, obviously like there's the allure of watching a show that your parents are watching and that's kind of like maybe too grown up for you, but what was it about it that just drew you in?
So there were some other shows that I kind of grew up watching. One of them, I can't remember the exact name because I watched all of this in Spanish. I used to watch the X-Files in Spanish as well. I didn't watch it in English until recently, actually. But there was a show called The Inexplicable Universe, I think it was, and The Twilight Zone.
Okay.
And those were very popular when I was growing up. They were always on reruns, and I used to watch them all the time. And I always had like this wonder for like weird stuff, aliens or like time traveling and things like that. And when my parents started watching the X-Files, and they would watch it just like you said every week, they were glued to it. It was the mystery of it, the whole alien thing, like what's out there. There probably are aliens. What if they're here? What if some of my friends are aliens? You don't know.
I don't think that ever crossed my mind while watching it, was what if my friends are aliens? But I can understand it.
I used to think that. I used to think that some of my friends were aliens, and I think my youngest child sometimes is a little bit of an alien. We used to call her our X-File because she was so strange as a little baby. We're like, she can't be real.
Okay. There are certain things where people talk to me about things and I generally have something to say back to that, but I don't know what else to say about that.
No one does.
So for the X-Files, you watched it at a young age, and it must have made a huge impression on you as far as like did it suck you in further into like that kind of like science fiction-y genre? Were you already kind of in it when you initially watched the show? Like, how did it influence you after you finished watching it? Because if you start watching in elementary school, you would have been near high school when you finished it.
So it's kind of weird because when I started watching it, I was a kid. I was living in Venezuela with my parents, and I was, watching it in Spanish. And then we moved to the U.S. when I was 11, and it kind of fell off for me for a while. I stopped watching it because they wouldn't really play it too much, the channels that I was watching, once we moved to Miami. And I kind of forgot about it for a few years. But the whole conspiracy theories and, government conspiracies and aliens, that always stuck with me. And I've always been fascinated by that. And it wasn't until later on as an adult that I got back into the X-Files. And it sucked me right in immediately, even though, like you said, the technology is super outdated and it's kind of funny to watch some of the episodes. I thought it was fascinating. The whole story, all of it, from beginning to end.
It is, and I like what X-Files did as far as like how they had their show laid out. We talked about like a lot of the shows were Monster of the Week, but then you'd get like these little arcs of, well, here's more of like this main story, and then they'll like allude to things in other episodes. Like it might just be a passing comment or a paper on a file or in a computer, and it's tied to like this bigger thing, and you find like you get like these bits and pieces, and you're just, waiting and waiting, and like it just builds up so much. And I think, that was one of the things that really drew me in was I could watch them. And back in the early 90s, you're recording stuff on a VCR if you miss it.
Yeah.
So if you miss an episode, hopefully you're not missing like something like too in depth, but eventually you're hopefully like catching it on a rerun or something. But it's got just enough to keep you like, it's just enough. Like, I gotta watch the next one. I gotta watch the next one.
Well, and I think the beauty of that show too is that even though it has such a complex story, anybody can just pick up an episode in any season and enjoy it, regardless of what the episode is about. And at the same time, I've been rewatching it. I restarted it maybe a month ago from season 1. And the more you rewatch it, the more things you catch that add up to the story that you probably didn't catch the first time or even the second time. Because there are very little things, like you said, a little piece of paper or something in the background, something someone said, a comment. And the more you rewatch it, the more you realize what a big story it is and what they had in mind and what they were building up for. But at the same time, you can watch any episode and enjoy it and not have to know necessarily everything.
Exactly, because most of the stories are self-contained, where it's like, okay, like the one that sticks out for me the most when like, and I was thinking about it when before we start recording, like when I close my eyes and think of the X-Files, the first episode that comes to mind is that like sideshow carnival episode. That's like, I think it's in the first season. And it might be like a later season. I'm not specifically sure, but it's like, it's that weird like freak show carnival, and like it ends with I think there's like some kind of like fish creature or fish boy. I'm not positive. I'm not 100% positive, but like that's the episode that sticks out in my mind. Is like it's a self-contained story of just like these weird sideshow clown, like not clown, but like sideshow characters essentially.
Is that the one where there's a character that has another person growing out of him?
I think so.
And he would like come out at night and do all the, I think, murders. I can't remember.
I maybe I think I haven't seen the episodes in forever, but
they're so good.
They are.
My favorite character in the X-Files is the cigarette smoking man. I love him.
That is a hot take.
I think he's fantastic. He is like so evil, but at the same time, I don't know, he grows on you. My favorite episode of the X-Files is the one that talks about his backstory. I think I can't remember the name of the episode, but the lone gunman, Mulder's little trio of quacks.
Yes.
It's them talking to Mulder, and they're telling him, I think, everything that they've found out about, this guy and how he ties into the government. And the entire time he is watching them through his like binocular thing. And he's having flashbacks of how he got involved with the syndicate and how he got involved with all this alien/government stuff. And it's, oh my God, I love it. I think he's the best character in the entire show.
That was going to be my next question of who is your favorite character. And I was like, oh, she's going to say, it's either going to be Mulder or Scully. But cigarette smoking man, that may be one of the podcast's biggest like hot takes in at least a year or so.
I love it. I really think he's a great character because, I mean, don't get me wrong. I love Mulder and Scully. They're so great and unique in their own ways, and their stories evolve so much. But I feel like the cigarette smoking man is so complex, and he was there in the first episode and he didn't even say a word. He was in the background as Scully was getting interviewed for the job with the FBI, and you don't even pay attention to him, but he was there from the beginning, overlooking everything, playing chess with everybody. And I love that.
Yep. And I think that's one of the things that, that the X-Files had is you had like the strong, core Mulder and Scully, but then you had these great secondary characters that rotated in. I think that's one of the things, like, you mentioned the lone gunman, Mulder's friends. Like, I love them in the context of like the X-Files show, but when they had their spin-off, I wasn't really too much into their show of just them. Like, I felt like they needed like Mulder and Scully to kind of like ground them a little bit. Like, yes, they're out there, but you've got like the central characters like grounding them to like how they should be, and then they have their own show and it's kind of not what you're expecting.
Yeah, I agree. I feel like, I mean, they had a good idea when they did that, but like you said, the lone gunmen need the X-Files and Mulder and even Scully to make it work, because they're too quacky, they're too out there. And even though Mulder's very out there as well, he's still an FBI agent. He still has like a mission, whereas the lone gunmen are kind of just going rogue.
Yep.
And it's a good balance in the X-Files, but you're right, the spin-off was a little bit, I don't know, it didn't really work.
Exactly. And then, of course, they also had the movies. And one of the movies, I think, the first movie came out in between seasons, didn't it?
Yes, the first movie came out, I want to say, between season 5 and 6. I believe. It was so good. I have a poster of the field with where the bees were, the domes where the bees. I have that poster in my garage.
That's awesome. Yeah, and it almost is, sometimes when TV shows do movies and then they come back to the TV show, and the one that I can think of the most is like Power Rangers. Like, Power Rangers had the movie, and then they resumed like making the show, and they didn't acknowledge the movie at all. But then the X-Files, it was like, okay, you need to have watched the movie, and then you can start watching like the next season, essentially.
Absolutely. The movie was, at least in my opinion, a very important part of the X-Files. You have to watch the movie and then continue.
We were talking before we started recording, and you mentioned that Hulu has the entire series, right?
I think so. I would have to double check, but the last time that I went on there, I believe they had all the seasons as well as the newer ones, when they did the reboot, or I don't know if it's considered a reboot, but the continuation, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Right. I'm looking it up right now just to make sure. It looks like Hulu does have it, and I bet, because I wonder if, because it's a Fox show, it's not going to go on Disney Plus, but it'll probably stay on Hulu.
Yeah.
Oh, the Disney purchase of everything.
I know, they're taking over.
They are. Sometimes for the good and sometimes for the bad. But...
Yes.
So for somebody listening now, like, we are, 26 years removed from when it started, because it started in 93.
Mm-hmm.
People are going to be listening to our episode, and they might not even have any clue about the X-Files. What would be like your pitch to them to say, like, hey, you should go and watch this show?
Well, okay, so in the last few years, it's been a really big, how should I say this? Like, it's been in to talk about like the Illuminati, and everybody says that anything weird that goes on, oh, the Illuminati is behind it, or, the government or FEMA, whatever. That's basically what the X-Files is. It's, imagine what kids right now, and by kids, I mean younger than me. But what people talk about right now, if you go on YouTube and you look up conspiracy theories, and you come up with Shane Dawson videos, for example, a lot of them go back to like the Illuminati. Oh, everything, the Illuminati is behind everything, and everything weird that happens, aliens or whatever, it's the Illuminati is behind it, and they control the world behind closed doors. That's basically what the X-Files is about. You have the Syndicate, which is a small group of men that are behind the scenes of, way above the government and anyone else, that call the shots. And they're in cahoots with aliens and the government and everything else. And no one has a say in it. And you have these two FBI agents who are trying to make things right. And, the truth is out there. They're trying to bring the truth to light, because they believe that people deserve to know it. And they can't. They really can't, because they're not powerful enough. They don't have the power to do it. And they're trying to uncover all these things, and you have the Syndicate, which, you know, in modern times would be kind of like what the Illuminati would be, or what people think it would be. And I just think it translates so well. I mean, I guess it is a little dated in the verbiage, and maybe some of the things they say, the technology is definitely dated. But as far as the conspiracies and what people think and the way people feel about, I want to know the truth, you know, are aliens really here? What's going on? What does the government want to do with us? That still translates to now. It's the same thing. That's what the show's about.
Well, there you go. All right. So we talked about the X-Files, which I honestly, you know what? I'm just going to say I'm going to do a rewatch of the show, and maybe when we have both finished it, because you're ahead of me on your rewatch.
Yes.
But if I can dedicate myself to, like, you know, rewatching this show, maybe we can have like an X-Files episode.
I would love that.
Because that would be fun.
Yes.
But we're going to move to a new fandom, which is a old fandom that has become new again. And my wife was into it when she was a kid, and I watched it, and now it's on Netflix. And I know I've talked about it with a few different people, that cosplay or just are into the show. But I am talking about Netflix's She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, which is a phenomenal show.
She-Ra is one of the best shows I've seen ever, probably.
Ooh, that's high praise. I have to say, because I didn't realize that they were making a She-Ra for Netflix. And some of these shows that they're bringing back, I'm like, oh, I had no clue, but they're really good. Like Voltron was, I thought, really well done. And I used to be into like Voltron from the 1980s. And like loved what Netflix did with it. And then I saw the character art for She-Ra, and I was like, okay, you know, they're going in a different direction than what I remember, but the show's not for me. But when I watched the show, I was like, I love this show. I love it so much. I love all these characters. They are real characters. Like every single, like, you look at them and you just see real characters, not just like stereotypical two-dimensional characters.
Oh, absolutely. I think that when it comes to She-Ra, and which is why I say that it's one of the best shows I've seen, is because I'm honestly taking the cartoon animation part out of it. The story itself is very human, and the things that these characters go through, you know, take the magic component aside, is what everyone goes through. Heartbreak, you know, it just, they experience things that everyone does, except it's just in cartoon form.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And that's what grabbed me. I didn't grow up with the old She-Ra. My mom used to watch. My mom was familiar with She-Ra and like He-Man and like all those things, but I didn't grow up with it. I remember the animation from, you know, my mom telling me about it, or sometimes playing on the TV on a rerun on a Saturday morning. But I wasn't into it. I didn't follow it. I didn't know much about it. So for me, She-Ra was a new thing. But as soon as I watched it, the first few episodes, you know, they're kind of silly. But as you get to know the characters, really just the whole animated part kind of, you know, goes away almost. You're really just watching characters develop and relationships form and them growing, especially the latest season. I don't know if you're caught up, but the latest season was very intense.
I am caught up, and I have to say that, like, going into that, because the second season was really short and didn't really end on, like, it just kind of ended without any like cliffhanger or what you should expect with season 3. But that, like, the latest season that they came out with was incredibly well done. There was many times that they went in a different direction than I thought that they were going to go with. Holy cow. Just, I don't know what to say beyond, like, I'm ready for the next season. Please give it to me as soon as possible.
Oh my God, me too. Season 3 was such a wild ride. I watched the whole thing in one sitting, and then I rewatched it like immediately. I just restarted the third season. I watched it twice in one day.
Wow.
I don't know. I thought it was so good and raw, and they really went into like in depth with the relationships between the characters and how they felt and how they were growing and how everything that they went through shaped them to who they're supposed to be, and letting go of your past. And I don't know.
I have to say, like, there are characters in every show that you kind of like brush off and you're like, they're there in the background. They're fine. They're adding like the little comedic relief. But I have to say, like, my heart breaks for Scorpia.
Oh my God, me
and
too.
it started in like the second season when she and oh gosh, Seahawk.
Yes.
When like she and Seahawk have like that heart to heart. Well, everyone else is like fighting, like they're having that conversation. It's like, oh man, like Scorpia is like this really like deep character. And then last season, third season, like I really just I feel for her so much, and I was right there along with her, like, hey Katra, why don't we just stay here? Like, why don't we just stay in the like this like wasted place where we can kind of just like rule over everything? And I like, my heart goes out to her so much.
Me too. It was heartbreaking. That was one of my first thoughts as I finished the third season was my poor, pure Scorpia. She is so sweet and so pure, and she's being treated like garbage. Scorpia reminds me of like The Rebound. That's the rebound that's in love with someone, and then they're trying to get that person to move on so that they can make them happy, but the other person won't. That's
Right.
that Katra and Scorpia relationship, and it's heartbreaking because Scorpia is so good in every way, and she's so loyal, and Katra just can't let go.
Yep.
It's so sad.
I've what I would like for the next season? I want a episode that goes into Scorpia, like her backstory, like when she was a princess and why she joined the Horde. I like that would be something I'd love to see, because you get like Adora's, we've gotten the backstories on like the main, like Adora, Katra, Bo, Glimmer, but I'd really like Scorpia's that character that I feel like is becoming like this really fan favorite character, and I just want more. I want more to know about her.
I do too. I'm really interested in how her family got involved with the Horde, because she's a very kind character, but she's loyal to the Horde. She's a Force captain and she does what she has to do, but her heart is just gold.
Mm-hmm.
And that's the thing about this show, that even though you have your heroes and your villains aren't just brushed off as villains and like that's what they are. They go into depth on why they are the way they are. And especially in season 3, I really enjoyed Hordak's story.
Mm-hmm.
His storyline I thought was great, and the relationship that he was forming, the friendship he was forming with Entrapta.
So good.
It was so good. It was so unexpected. I wasn't expecting that at all, because before that, Hordak was just kind of a background, the evil guy behind the scenes.
Mm-hmm.
And no one was really paying attention to him. Everything was Shadow Weaver and everyone else in the Horde, but not really Hordak. And you kind of fell for, like, I don't know, I felt for him a little bit. He had his own traumas and his own insecurities, and he was just reacting to that, and that's what got him to where he was.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, like that. And that was the thing. Like, you're like, okay, Hordak's this, master villain. He's going to take over. But why is he trying to build like a portal? Okay, that means that there's other planets or other like dimensions or whatever. And then you find out his backstory, and again, like he's had this developing relationship with Entrapta over like a period of 2 seasons, and you just feel like you feel for his character. Like, yes, he is a bad guy, but dang, if some of his reasons weren't, valid, I guess is the only word I can say. Is like he in his mind has valid reasons for doing what he is doing.
For sure, he was reacting to what he went through in his life, and it honestly broke my heart to see his reaction when Catra lied and said that Entrapta was responsible for letting the princesses in. He was so like in shock.
Mm-hmm.
That was really sad.
It was. It's.
I felt bad.
Oh, it's such a good show. And then even then when like Adora's talking to Entrapta and she's like, I didn't know that you were alive and you should come back and join us. And she's like, no, I like it here. Like, we're friends. I have friends here, you know? Like the other princesses didn't really get along with her, and she's got Hordak who's into technology and she's into technology, and they get along.
Yeah, she felt at home.
Oh, it's so good. What a great show.
I'm sorry, but what happened to Entrapta? Where did she get sent to? I'm very concerned.
Oh gosh, there are so many questions going into next season, like where like you said, like where did Entrapta go? Where's the storyline going to go with like this now universal storyline that we have going on? I mean, there is so many questions that I have questions. Like, there's so many questions that I just need to know answers.
And it really threw me off with the whole story of Mara, because the entire season 1 and season 2, you thought that Mara just went rogue. She went crazy.
Right.
Because she couldn't handle being She-Ra, and that's what you thought of her. And then in season 3, you find out that that wasn't the case at all, that she was literally trying to save everyone, and she did what she could to do that, even though it made her seem crazy.
Mm-hmm. I have to, like, I'm going to go back to a different show just for a moment, but I think people, executives, whoever has the money to like do these shows, I think they saw something, you know, because Avatar: The Last Airbender is one of those shows that was a cartoon show, a kid's show, but it dealt with storylines that were adult, and just, you know, they didn't like shy away from tackling a lot of these, you know, storylines. They were like real storylines with people dying, people being injured, people, you know, captured, imprisoned, all this stuff going on with a war and a 12-year-old kid, and people like fell in love with that show and the characters. And now you're seeing these shows come back, these shows like Voltron, like She-Ra, where you're having, yes, it's an animated show, yes, it's got the bright colors and it's like geared towards kids, but the story is so great in these shows. Like, if you put this up against any like live action show, it would blow people out of the water.
Oh, absolutely. I completely agree. And it's funny because I actually watch She-Ra with my kids. I have 3 of these things. And my daughter, first of all, my 3-year-old, she's obsessed with the show. She knows everything about it. She thinks that she's She-Ra. It's a whole thing. But my 10-year-old, he understands the story. And when we were watching season 3 together, he said on his own, he said, you know, I don't think Catra's bad. I think she just really misses her friend.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'm glad you understand that. Like, it's not an good versus evil thing necessarily. Everyone is just a person with their own emotions and feelings and traumas, and he gets that, and he really enjoys the show. And I don't know, I think they've done a really good job in appealing to adult audiences with all these adult scenarios, basically. Mm-hmm. While also being able to relate to kids.
Absolutely, because we watched the show with our 3 kids, and I think when it came out, I was like, okay, we're going to watch it because, you know, we watch Voltron together. We try to watch a lot of the stuff on Netflix that, like, I like we kind of like test run it just to make sure it's going to be okay, and then we're easing them into like more adult stuff. But it's definitely a show where even like my daughter has gone back and rewatched like certain episodes because she just loves the show.
For sure. For sure. When season 3 came out, the first thing my son was like, "Mom, are we gonna watch it?" He hadn't watched it yet. I had already watched it twice. He goes, "Are we gonna watch it?" I was like, "Yes, let's sit down and watch it." And we sat down and watched the episodes, and he was glued to it. He was so interested in where the story was going, and he really likes the villains in it because he doesn't think that they're bad. And I like that. That makes me love him more because he really doesn't think that they're bad. He really thinks that they're just in a different situation. And I talk to him a lot about, life. I try to get him ready for his little, his things. And, we've talked about like bullying a lot. And he says, I've always told him, bullies usually have insecurities of their own, and that makes them act that way. That doesn't make it right. It doesn't mean that they should be that way, but there's a reason they're acting out. And that's kind of how he feels about the villains in She-Ra. He goes, Catra was just always, she wasn't treated nicely. No one was nice to her. I'm like, yeah, you're right. No one was nice to her. And she doesn't know how to be nice either because of that.
Yeah, and man, that episode where they're both out there and Adora stays and leaves Catra essentially, it's just, it's like, it's those small moments in shows where it's just like that one decision just sets everyone else down a different path. Like,
yep,
little decisions.
Absolutely. No, it's a great show. They're really doing a good job.
It is. I'm excited. I don't think they've announced officially a season 4, but I imagine that we'll be getting, I would hope we get at least another, 3 or 4 seasons of episodes, ideally.
I hope so too. I've read a couple of articles from like, the creators and stuff, and it seems like they have a lot of content for the story. So I hope it continues for a little while longer.
So if you haven't watched She-Ra and the Princesses of Power, please go to your Netflix account and watch it. Just give it a chance. You'll fall in love because it's a wonderful show.
It's true.
See, 2 of us said it. That's 100% of the people on this podcast episode have said that you should go watch this show. So you should go do it. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So we've talked the conspiracy of the 90s of aliens and paranormal stuff, Monster of the Week. We've talked about the current generation of She-Ra, and we're going to fall into the middle, mixing paranormal with girl power. And one of my favorite shows, and I will say that I have 2 children who bear the name of characters from this show, and we are going to talk about Buffy the Vampire Slayer.
What are your kids' names?
One is named Xander, and the other is named Willow.
Oh my goodness. That made my entire week.
Now they all have nerdy names because my Xander, his middle name is a Firefly character, and Willow's middle name is a Star Wars character.
That is amazing.
Then my other kid doesn't really have a tie to like nerdy stuff per se, but he's got some nerd names in him too.
That is amazing.
Well, it was all, I pitched it and my wife said yes. So
you win.
I'm happy with that.
You definitely win.
All right. So if you were watching The X-Files in elementary school, you were the prime audience for Buffy the Vampire Slayer when it debuted in 1997. Or did you not watch it when it came out and you got it later?
Oh, no, I definitely watched it. My best friend and I used to record it on VHS. She had a little VCR thing where you recorded it, like you set a timer. Mm-hmm. And we used to record it. Buffy was our jam.
Now, for those people who have no idea what we're talking about, a VCR is the predecessor to like a CD or a DVD, and it was this big old blocky tape, and you had to set it to record, and you hope that you got the times right, because sometimes if the episode started later or got delayed, then you'd miss out on it. There was no such thing as TiVo or DVRs back then.
Oh, yeah, it's true. And there were many times where we would go back to watch the episode and it was either missing like the first 5 minutes or the last 5 minutes.
Oh gosh, if it was the last 5 minutes,
It was awful.
because especially, again, in the 90s, catching a rerun of a show that's already aired was extremely difficult.
Oh, for sure. It didn't really exist.
Yeah, I mean, I think it would happen occasionally, but it wasn't like a routine thing where they'd be like, okay, well, we're gonna re-air the show at this time. No, if you missed it, you missed it.
For sure. And I actually missed a lot of Buffy when I was a kid, even though I was obsessed with it. I couldn't really follow it because, I had school or I had things to do, and you couldn't be home to watch it at the time that it was airing. And I want to say 6 years ago or so, Netflix put the entire thing on there. It's not there anymore, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that's when I felt so excited and happy that I could finally sit down and watch one of my favorite shows ever in its entirety, from beginning to end, with no interruptions, no commercials, nothing.
There was a time period I was living in college, but I moved in over the summer. I moved in with friends, and they didn't have cable, and I had to make arrangements with a friend of mine. I said, I will buy you all the videotapes. I just need you to record Buffy and bring it to me the next day.
That's awesome.
So that I think Buffy aired on Tuesday. So on Wednesday, my friend would drive over and bring the videotape and drop it off. And that would be the routine for 3 or 4 of the episodes. And I was like, okay, I'm good now. We're safe. But what was it about the show that got you interested in it?
Honestly, I really liked Buffy's character. She was, she was so tiny, and she was this blonde, pretty girl in high school, and she would just kick vampire butt all the time. And she was basically a superhero. And the show was really dark. And from watching the X-Files, I was already into the supernatural thing, and the vampire scene kind of fell into that for me. And it was almost like the perfect balance between girl power, but also, girly things with their crushes on boys and their high school life and everything, and also, the whole supernatural thing. There were witches there were vampires, there were all kinds of things. So it was perfect for me. I loved it.
Absolutely. It's one of those shows that, again, you have season-long storylines, or even after the first season, you have seasons where there's little hints when you go back and watch it, where they're leading up to things that happen in future seasons, and they're dropping those little breadcrumbs, and you're like, oh, that's what they meant 2 seasons ago, and that's what that one character was talking about, and now here it is coming to fruition. And I mean, but between the characters and the storyline, and just these layers of character that just build from season 1, and it's one of the things where, when I tried to get my wife into watching the show, which I was successful for 3 seasons, we got all the way through season 3, before we had to stop. But I said, season 1 is rough. Season 1 is like that rough first season of a show where they're figuring things out and figuring characters out and the writing. But I said, once you get into season 2, it gets really good.
Oh, for sure. And not only do they introduce more characters that end up being a really big deal in the show, but the main characters that have been there since episode 1 start really developing and growing. And Buffy is the queen of puns, and that always made me happy because I love puns. And I don't know, it was one of those shows that no matter what the episode was about, some of them were silly, some of them were intense, kind of like the X-Files, but there was always some comic relief in every episode. It was a dark comedy, to me at least.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, I really like the character development in Buffy. Buffy, I mean, she's the main character, and she obviously grows a lot and learns a lot, but I feel like her sidekicks, you know, Giles and Spike. Giles and Spike are my favorite characters in Buffy, and I feel like their character developments are insane. You know, Giles starts as her mentor, her watcher, and you know, he's very by the book, and then through the seasons he becomes almost angry at the system that he belongs to of these watchers, and he really has Buffy's back, and he teaches her, and he's her sidekick. He kicks butt too.
Exactly. Yeah, it's one of the shows where I think at the age that I was watching it, you weren't like you weren't exposed to characters really having those layers or those depths of, you know, having relationships built on top of that, or having these like, you know, dynamics. And it was very like the dynamic shifted between the characters. Like sometimes the characters were really close with each other, and then sometimes they'd be driven apart and have to find their way back. And you'd get like these odd pairings, like when I think it was season 4, like, you know, and I try not to drop like seasons or episode names or stuff because it's hard to follow. But like, you have Spike living with Xander for a while, and Spike living with Giles for a while, and you get these odd couplings, and they just work. Like they work in this weird context, and it's funny, but it's like it's necessary to the story, and you get, you know, they grow. Like Spike was like this evil bad guy, but now he's kind of on their side a little bit, and then as it develops, like he's like part of the team essentially.
He saves the day really at the end.
It's definitely something. It's something to, and I know Buffy had its 20th anniversary last year, and it's definitely one of those shows where you're just like, dang, like it's been 20 years and it's still this almost like this cultural like moment in time of, look, women can do it all. Women can be the hero. Women can do this. Like, you know, and I think of like Ripley from like Aliens. And it's like, okay, you got Ripley from Aliens, you got like Buffy, and you start getting these really strong female characters. I'm not going to say like Buffy was the beginning of it, but Buffy was like the thing that I feel like reached out to a huge cross section of people that were watching the show.
Oh, absolutely. Especially at that time. I mean, at least for me and in my age group, you know, nobody saved her. No one saved Buffy. Buffy saved herself the entire time. And she saved everyone else along the way. And, you know, everything else that I was watching, whether it was Disney movies or other shows or whatever, you know, it was the girl was always being saved by the guy. And that wasn't the case at all in Buffy. Like she was the owner of her own story.
Exactly. Now, you said you like Spike and Giles.
Oh, yes.
Favorites. Do you have like a favorite episode of like, this is my Buffy episode, like this is my go-to?
Well, I really like the episode. I really like the episode where I can't remember how exactly it starts, but I think it was Faith is in it. Eliza Dushku.
Mm-hmm.
And that's when the mayor of the town, who is like the evil guy of that season, something happens where they start distributing candy to the adults, and it makes them act like children.
Yep.
And Buffy's mom eats the candy, and Giles eats the candy, and they turn into teenagers, and they're just crazy.
Yep.
And Buffy doesn't know what to do. None of the teenagers know what to do, and it's kind of a funny thing to think of, you know, all the adults acting like teenagers, and the teenagers are the voice of reason. And that episode cracked me up. The entire time I was just enjoying myself.
Oh gosh, it's so good. I know like my favorites, I liked the replacement where like Xander gets split into 2 Xanders.
Oh my gosh.
Like the real confident Xander and like the Xander that's kind of like worried all the time, and he's like, it's a robot, it's got to be a robot. And I like the episode after Once More with Feeling, where I think
Oh
it's called Tabula
yes.
Rasa, where they forget, like they have their memories wiped, and Spike thinks Giles is his father, and he's like, you named me Randy Giles.
Oh, they're all so good.
Oh my goodness, yes. I know, there's definitely some episodes that are more like, and you got to get through them. And again, I look at season 1, but season 1, you really, it's required viewing because you got to learn about the characters and the story and everything. But man, that is one show where I'm excited to watch that again. I have like the DVDs, and one day I'm gonna pop them into the PlayStation and watch them again because it's such a good show. I'd love to see it come back in some iteration. I know that there was talk of like a Buffy reboot without Joss Whedon involved, and people were like up in arms about it, saying no, don't do it.
I heard about that. And I mean, I'm not opposed to it. It's been a long time. It's been 20 years. 25 years or 20 years?
20, a little
20
bit over
years.
20 now. I think it's like 21 this
21
year.
or 22 years, you're right. And I'm not opposed to it. I mean, it's kind of like with She-Ra. These reboots aren't meant for the people that watch the original show. They're meant for the new generations and to get them interested in that same story, but in a more modern way in their eyes.
Exactly. And I think, it's something where, and it's dang, like I do a fandom podcast. Like this is called Tales from the Fandom. But dang, if there aren't people out there, and yes, I would be like weirded out by a new Buffy series. But again, you're bringing people into that fandom. I don't want to keep people out of it. And it's happening in like so many other like Star Wars, like, and I'm not going to go into like my fandom rant about Star Wars and stuff, but let people enjoy what they like and welcome them in. Like, hey, you like Star Wars, I like Star Wars. You like Buffy, I like Buffy. Like that, we don't need to have like in-depth like, oh, you don't like the exact same thing that I like, so therefore you're invalid, or your fandom is invalid to me. Like, it frustrates me to no end.
And not to mention that, these newer, I guess, reboots of certain shows, if they get new audiences of new generations interested, it's going to make them want to watch the older ones too eventually, because, where did this come from? If a new Buffy gets made, let's say, and it sticks and kids like it, and they find out that this is a reboot, it's a remake of something from the 90s, they're going to be like, okay, well, maybe I'll try to watch that and see what that's like.
Exactly. And with any new or rebooted fandom, there's always going to be, and this is the kicker, new merchandise for us.
Exactly.
And I like merchandise because some of my stuff is hard to find. I'd like new stuff, please.
I agree. There is no cigarette smoking man merchandise out there, by the way. I've looked everywhere. I had to have my friend Rachel make me a car decal that says "Trust no one" because it's not out there.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay. That is something. I'm shocked that they don't have like a Funko Pop figure of a cigarette smoking man.
Me too. I believe they have Mulder and Scully, but they don't have him. And that's not okay.
That's a shame right there.
It is a shame. He's the best one.
All right, Susie. Now we have talked about fandoms, but one of the things that I found you through, which is the powerful application or app or website Instagram, and I found you probably because I was clicking through on like various cosplayers, and as I do because I've talked to a lot of cosplayers, because cosplayers like fandoms and it's easy to see what fandoms people are into. And you're a cosplayer, and you're into cosplay, and you cosplay a lot of other fandoms, and so I guess my first thing is how did you get into cosplay?
You know, I I didn't know what cosplay was for a long time. I remember seeing on Facebook and Instagram and even Pinterest, people dressed up as certain characters, and I didn't know that that was cosplay. I thought that they were just, doing it for, like a magazine shoot or a show or maybe Halloween. I had no idea what cosplay was. And it's last year in February of 2018. It was my son's birthday, and he really wanted to go to MegaCon Orlando that May, and so that was my birthday present to him. It was to go to MegaCon, and I don't know what got into me, and I said, I'm gonna make us costumes. I didn't know how to sew or make props or anything, and I was like, yeah, I'll make us stuff. Why not? And so that's when I went on Instagram and I just started looking up, costume ideas, and I like discovered this whole new world of cosplay. It opened up my entire universe. I was like, what is that? People do this all year for fun? Out of nowhere, they just make things and wear them and take pictures. That sounds fantastic. And I was like, okay, I think I can do this. And I opened up my little Instagram and I started looking up YouTube tutorials. YouTube was like my third parent. YouTube taught me how to sew and how to make everything. And I don't know, I just kind of went for it without thinking too much. My son wanted to be the Red Power Ranger from RPM.
Okay.
And I was like, okay, yeah, I'll make you that. And I did. I made him a suit and I made him a helmet out of foam. I met a lot of people online while I was trying to do that helped me because I had no idea what I was doing. And I did the same with my costume. And of course, my mom and my sister were like, we want to go too. Can you make us costumes too? I was like, sure. And then I did it, and I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea what I was getting myself into, honestly. But after we went to the first convention, and we were all dressed up. My costumes that time, they weren't very great, but I did my best, and my son was so happy. And everyone was dressed up. The convention was packed. There were so many vendors, and there were so many things to do, and people were stopping us for pictures, and we were asking other people for pictures. And it was so much fun. It was so fun. And that's when I was like, I want to do this all the time. And I did. That's when I started. It was about a year and a half ago. And I was just, I want to do this all the time because it's too much fun. And I'm 30 years old and I want to dress up as my favorite characters because I can.
What was your first costume?
The first costume I made for myself was Sailor Neptune. I actually dyed my hair teal because I was too scared to style a wig. So I dyed my hair and I made the costume, and I couldn't believe I did that. And I not only did I make my Sailor Neptune costume, but I made my mom a Sailor Venus and my sister a Sailor Jupiter. So I made 3 Sailor Fukus for MegaCon. And they came out pretty good for being my first projects. And they were all so happy. My mom wore a wig and everything. It was amazing.
Oh, that's so awesome. So you and hey, I was at MegaCon that year. I've been at MegaCon the past 3 years?
That's
maybe?
awesome.
Love going there. Sometimes it's a bit much. I hate the Saturday shuffle.
That was my problem this past year. I went on Saturday with my husband and my daughter because we wanted to meet Christopher Lloyd, and we went dressed up as Back to the Future characters, and we couldn't walk. It was so crowded.
Yeah, that was the thing because, I'd love to go Thursday and Friday, but between work and the kids, school schedule and stuff, there's no way I can do it. So we tend to go Saturday, Sunday, and Saturday is just so packed.
Crazy.
And then like you want to stop and look at stuff, but at the same time, like it's also let's keep moving, let's keep moving. And one of the things, because my wife came with me both days, we were looking for, tying it back to She-Ra for a second. She was looking for like She-Ra merch, like not like official merch, but like not fan art, but something like homemade, handcrafted She-Ra type stuff, and nobody had anything.
Really?
And that was like the big letdown. And hopefully people get on that for next year's, like some cool like She-Ra stuff, like a She-Ra purse or a She-Ra like wallet, just something that's not, just prints of people drawing She-Ra.
For sure. Even a She-Ra lanyard to hold your badge for the convention.
Absolutely. Now, I find it hard to believe, I'm not going to say I'm questioning you, but just cosplaying a year and a half, you have done some incredible work in that year and a half.
Oh, thank you.
So you did the Sailor Fukus as your first ones, first stuff that you have made, plus a Power Rangers costume as well. How did you go from that to being a part of like a big Sailor Moon group in Orlando?
Well, I actually made the group.
Oh, dang.
Yeah. So, when I was, making my Sailor Neptune costume and my mom and my sister's costumes, I was on Instagram a lot because that's where I was finding a lot of inspiration and a lot of tutorials that people were posting to get ideas on how the heck to do this, because I had never sewn in my life. And as I did that, I found a lot of cosplayers and I found a lot of Sailor Moon groups, and some of those were the Sailor Scouts from Jacksonville, and the Pretty Guardians from Missouri. And they're no longer a group, but at the time they were pretty impressive. And I saw that and I was like, wow, I would love to do something like that. I didn't know that was a thing either. Not only was cosplay new to me, but cosplay groups in general. I didn't know that people did that a big group of people would get together and decide, okay, these are the characters that we're going to portray and we're just going to do this. I had no clue. And I started, finding more and more groups and more cosplayers, and I just said to myself, wow, I want to do this. I want to have a group. This Sailor Moon was my favorite cartoon growing up. My favorite anime. It was not the first anime I ever watched, but one of the first that really grabbed me, and I was obsessed with it. I had all the things, and I lived in Venezuela at the time, so the supply was kind of limited, but I had everything I could get my hands on. And I would draw her, and I would make my own paper dolls of Sailor Moon. So Sailor Moon was a big deal for me. And then as an adult, I was 30 years old, and I was like, wait a second. I can be Sailor Moon and have my friends dress up as everyone else and have it be a thing? Yeah, I'm down. And I decided to open a group. So I opened up an Instagram, and I just started posting saying, hey, if you live in Orlando and you want to do this, let me know. And people started reaching out. I reached out to a couple of friends that I already knew liked Sailor Moon, and I asked them if they wanted to join, and they did, and they're still in the group. And then almost everyone else, though, reached out to me saying, hey, I see you're looking for scouts. Do you have a Mercury? Do you have a Saturn? And that's kind of how it all came about, just kind of random.
That is incredibly awesome. Like that's so cool.
Yeah, thank you.
So, with cosplaying with the Sailor Guardian Sailor. Oh, gosh, I'm messing up the name now. With Sailor Guardians of Orlando, Sailor Guardians of Orlando. Do you all? I assume you go to conventions together. Do you do like other stuff together? Like I know different groups do different things, and I wasn't sure what, if anything, you guys did together.
So as far as like the group, like Sailor Guardians Orlando, we kind of stick to the scouts that we chose for ourselves, and we try to go to local conventions. So we went to MetroCon. That was our last convention. We had a showcase there where we did Sailor Moon's wedding, and that was a lot of fun. We went to Holiday Matsuri. Half of the group went to Collecticon in Jacksonville. So we try to go to local conventions as much as we can. Obviously, conventions are expensive and cosplay is expensive. So we I feel a lot of groups are very strict, I have found, with like what they want you to do in attendance and stuff. And we're a little bit more relaxed. We're more friends than we are anything else. And as we've gotten to know each other, we've kind of become a little family. So the cosplay aspect has kind of become a second aspect of the group, and the friendship has become first. So we just kind of play by ear. Some of the girls are going to do villains, I think, for Holiday Matsuri, or maybe a little bit after that. But we really just do it for fun. It just makes us happy. We sometimes come up with an idea last minute saying, hey, do you guys want to do a photo shoot of Fruit Maids? That was a last minute idea. And we're like, okay. And one of the girls found a cafe to go to, and everybody made their costumes within like a week or two, and we got together and did it.
That's so awesome.
It was so much fun. We have so much fun together.
What's funny is I think that's the tea room that you went to is one that my wife and daughter went to have like a high tea one day, and I was like, oh, I know that place. They talked about it. It's
so cute. It's so good. The food, they have these cucumber sandwiches that changed my life. Oh my god.
So besides Sailor Moon, or the Sailor Fuku Sailor stuff that you do, what other characters have you cosplayed? What do you look for in characters that you want to cosplay? Like, what's your, I guess what is your when you're looking at a character, like how do you decide like that's the character that you want to do?
So, okay, that varies a lot for a lot of people. Like, I know that for some people, they go by like the design. If they like a design of a character, they don't care if they've seen the show or not, which is fine. But for me, I like to cosplay characters that I really, really like, which is why I cosplayed Sailor Moon. I made an Adora costume. I made the sword. I did an Agent Scully. I've cosplayed Ranma, and these are all characters that I've always loved, and that kind of means something to me. And it makes the project more fun, I guess I could say. There's an anime from the 70s that I used to watch with my mom. It's called Candy Candy. And no one knows it. No one has any idea what it is. But I'm totally making a cosplay of it. Because I love that character. I love the show. No one knows it. It's just basically between me and my mom. And no one's going to know who I am, but I don't care.
That's right. That's one of the things about conventions that I like is I'll see people cosplaying. I'll have no idea what the character is from. And hey, I walk up to the person, I say, what are you cosplaying? Like, what is it from? Because that way I can be like, oh, well, it's from this. Let me check it out. Like, I like the costume. Let me see what it's all about.
For sure. And, when I went to Holiday Matsuri, this past one, 2018, the first day on Friday, I went as girl type Ranma, and I didn't think anyone was going to know who I was. Not a lot of people watch Ranma, and not a lot of people know who they are. And surprisingly, I got stopped a lot for pictures, and a lot of people told me, wow, I love your Ranma, and that was so unexpected. I didn't think anybody was going to know who I was.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What's your favorite thing about cosplaying?
Honestly, it's like making your kid dreams come to life. When I was a kid and I liked a show or I liked a movie or a certain character, I would pretend to be that character 100%. I wouldn't have the costume or the props or anything, but in my head, I was like, okay, I'm Sailor Moon and this is who I am right now. And I would just go about my day pretending that I was Sailor Moon or that I was Rapunzel or whoever I wanted to be that day. And with cosplay, you can actually make that happen. You style the wig, you make the costume, or you buy the costume, however you prefer to cosplay, and then you put it all on, and there you go. You made it happen.
There you go. Oh, I do have to ask, because it's something that I always get like, I'm more curious about, like, do you ever feel self-conscious, like when you're in costume but you're not at the convention, like if you're walking from your car to somewhere or you're going out and like it's afterwards and it's like you're in the costume but you have, and I guess the closest thing I could say is like you have muggles looking at you.
I actually really enjoy the awkwardness that comes with that. I'm a big fan of, going into the Starbucks in full cosplay and ordering a coffee, and people are looking at me, and I'm like, yeah, hi, bless you in the name of the moon.
That is awesome. That takes incredible self-confidence, and that is awesome.
It's just, I think it's really fun. A lot of people don't even know what cosplay is. I didn't even know 2 years ago what cosplay was. And they do look at you, not weird, that's not the right term for it, because most people are just curious. But there are some people that are looking at you like you are insane. And I actually really enjoy that. I just look at them and I'm like, hey, how you doing?
Oh my goodness. So, on top of your cosplay, you also have an Etsy shop.
I do, yes.
What do you do on your Etsy shop so people can find out more about that as well?
So right now is mostly Sailor Moon brooches, and that started when I made my own Sailor Moon costume. I really wanted to play around with resin and make my own brooch, and I did, and it turned out pretty well. And I kind of fell in love with the whole resin process, and I played with it more and more until I felt more confident with it. And I decided to see if it was something that would stick. And I started, I got some molds, I made some of my own, and made a bunch of Sailor Moon brooches, all of her different brooches from each season, and the regular Scout brooches and things like that. And I just decided to kind of go for it. I opened an Etsy shop and put my listings on it and said, okay, I'm just going to promote it on my own Instagram and see what happens. And people liked it. A lot of people liked it, and I wasn't expecting that. And it felt so good. And it was a little overwhelming at times when I had too many sales. And there's been times where I'd had to put the shop on vacation.
Mm-hmm.
Because, I ran out of resin or whatever it may have been, I just needed a break. But I really didn't think it was going to take off. I really didn't think that anyone was going to want my stuff. But they did. And I don't know, I felt really good because I actually really enjoyed it, and I put a lot of love into my resin creations, and it's a lot of fun. And then the fact that people want to pay money for the things I make, it blows my mind.
Do you have any plans for the future for Etsy and like commissioning for cosplay, or is it something where like right now you're just going to stick to what you are doing at the moment?
So for now, I think I'm going to stick to the Etsy shop. I do have plans on adding more things to it. I'm actually working on like some new props right now that I'm possibly going to put on the Etsy shop. But as far as commissions go, I don't think I'm going to do that for now, just because I like how fun it is for me right now. It's more of a hobby. It's something I do to de-stress, sewing my costumes or making a prop or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like even though getting commissions for it is a great honor and it would be amazing, at the same time, I don't want to necessarily turn my stress relief into a job.
Right. I totally understand that.
Yeah.
That's cool. So yeah, and I think one of the things that I always find interesting with Sailor Moon cosplayers or Sailor Scout cosplayers is that these items that you do are like, it's almost like you kind of need to have not only one, but you kind of like need a backup in case something happens to the one that's like on your costume. And like, your prices are incredibly, like, they seem incredibly reasonable for someone that has no idea about anything Sailor Moon, Fuku related.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, definitely. If there's anything I've learned from cosplaying and going to conventions is that Oh my gosh, you almost always need a backup for things because things will break or they'll fall or you'll spill something on it or what have you. Backups are always a good idea.
Exactly. And you can get your backups at Susy's Etsy shop. So there you go. Do it. Do it now. Stop the podcast and just go to her Etsy page.
Do it.
Favorite the shop. That's what I did. I just favorited the shop.
Oh,
so.
thank you. I appreciate that.
All right, Susy. Now we have gone over time just a smidge, but I think that's okay. But for people that are interested in finding you on the great wide world of the internet, what are some of the best places to do so?
Well, if you want to look me up on Instagram, it's Susy in the Sky Designs, and my Etsy shop is the same name, Susy in the Sky Designs, for all your Sailor Moon needs.
And of course, we can't forget the Sailor Guardians Orlando. I think that's just on Instagram as just Sailor Guardians Orlando.
Yes, it's a wonderful group of people.
Yes, follow the group of people because I can assure you that Susy is not going to be the first and only member of Sailor Guardians Orlando that's going to come on the podcast. Hopefully, as I've done with the Cosmic Coterie members, hopefully I'll get a few more to come on and talk to me about different fandoms, because I think that's one of the favorite things about like people in groups is that everyone is so completely different. Like, yes, you all have the Sailor Moon love, but you totally have lots of other things that you're like, oh yeah, let me bust out some X-Files knowledge.
Oh my gosh, absolutely. We've all like introduced each other to so many different things.
Absolutely. So for people that are interested in finding Susy on the internet, you can find all the links on the show notes that you're listening to this podcast, or on our website, or on the Facebook page, or on the Instagram page, or the Twitter. I will basically have every link that Susy needs for you to go and check out her stuff on Instagram and Etsy. And Susy, I just want to say thank you for taking the time out of your schedule to talk with me about some great fandoms. And hopefully, if I can binge some X-Files, I will have you back sooner rather than later.
Oh my gosh, no, thank you for having me. This was so much fun, and I would love to come back and talk more X-Files with you.
Thank you for listening to Tales from the Fandom. Subscribe to us on iTunes or your podcast app of choice. Follow us on Facebook at www.facebook.com/Tales from the Fandom to see photos, links, leave feedback, and check out upcoming guests. If you'd like to be a guest, email David at talesfromthefandom@gmail.com.